reason. That's what we call him. Our own college basketball analyst, Jay Bilas. Jay, there's so many tentacles that will be going forward with this story that first broke last week on Friday as we were on the air, the Yahoo.com story. I guess the question now is, what happens next? Not in terms of reform for the rules in the NCAA, because that's going to take a while, but what's the next leg of this story as all these teams that are some of the best and biggest names in college basketball and some of the best and biggest players in college basketball have been on some level implicated?
Well, I don't think there is a next leg as far as this season's concerned. I think it would be after that. So you're going to have, if other shoes drop in any reporting, then you'd have to deal with it. But I think you can tell that the NCAA is interested in getting through this season with how quickly everyone was cleared that was implicated. Because even though these were small level, low level, most of them eligibility issues, that being a dinner here or maybe a few bucks there, even though those things, I've always thought, hey, why is this taking so long? They've always taken a fair amount of time to deal with. And if it had happened at the beginning of the season, you go, why is this guy out 4 games while they try to figure this out, or 5 games, whatever it would be? And they got it all taken care of within 1 day. And they can. It really shows when they feel like doing it, they can. And the NCAA tournament's coming up. They have been, the NCAA in their limited defense here, they have been told by the FBI that they need to stand down. So it's not like when they hear something, they're just going in and doing a full-blown investigation, because they've been asked to stand down on a lot of these issues that are being investigated by the FBI. So unless something else comes out, I don't think you're going to see a whole lot that's going to happen before the tournament. They're not going to, and I've said this before, the one thing we know, the one thing we know is all of these games are going to be played at their scheduled times, and all the money that is contracted to change hands is going to change hands at the scheduled time. Like the business of college basketball is not going to stop. The commerce is going to continue.
Well, see, the cynic, as Jay Bilas, the cynic will always say, you knew that was going to happen. But I do like the point you just made, because everyone will say, of course, they're not going to interfere with the tournament. But as you alluded, they have been told to stand down by the FBI on this, correct?
Yeah, that doesn't mean they can't deal with eligibility issues that are right in front of their face. Those are two different things. But I mean, it's not like they're digging right now to try to help the FBI because in those types of issues. So they're not doing full-fledged investigations throughout college basketball right now with all of these issues because they're not to get in the way of the FBI. By stand down, that's what I mean. But if they've got eligibility issues that are right in front of their face, they can deal with it. But my point is, like when you had issues with, take Duke's Wendell Carter, for example. His parents had a meeting with an agent, which is not illegal or improper in any way. Now, if they, the implication was, did they take a meal from this ledger or any expenses from a meal? And ultimately, the answer was no, and the young man played. Now, if that had happened at the beginning of the year in years past without the specter of this FBI investigation, those things often have taken forever. And we're dealing, you would be dealing with the same issue. So what would usually happen is the NCAA would ask the school to hold the kid out while they figured it out. And to the point where they'd say, well, I just sat down and had a glass of water. Was it bottled water? Just stuff like that.
Was there cream cheese with the bagel?
No, that's it. Yeah.
Exactly. Just stuff that would take forever, where no reasonable person would think that was right or fair. So here, and this may be the cynic in me, that I think this was handled really quickly, in large measure because the tournament is coming up. And you heard Mark Emmert on CBS last Saturday talking about, we've been working really hard to help. They always say they're working really hard. They talk about their robust vision and all that stuff. But this has always been slow. And all of a sudden, with the tournament a couple weeks away, this was fast. And he actually said something about, trying to make sure that by Selection Sunday, we don't have the specter of this hanging over everything.
So, and to your point of fast things, remember when Shabazz Napier said he went to bed hungry? The next day, I think all the kids got cream cheese and snacks now. So if they want to do it fast, to your point, they can do it fast. I want to get on the court with you. I know you had a big one last night with the U beating North Carolina. But the one thing, just because it's off what Jalen Rose and Jay Will had to say about leverage for this situation, and we all know in any negotiation type thing, if you have leverage, how much your leverage is, how big the hammer you can to swing. And their points were, do players sit out the NCAA tournament, or if you make it to the Final Four, then boycott the Final Four till there is a change? I just gave my thoughts on that. What would your thoughts be on those situations?
Well, I think it's unlikely, Mike, just because you're dealing with players that are transient. They're only in school for a certain amount of time. And so the idea that would happen, I think is, I don't want to say it's far-fetched because it's not. There have been discussions by players about that in the last several years. And one team in particular had discussed, and I know this for a fact, had discussed the idea of delaying one of the games, of not coming out for an hour or two. Ultimately, they decided not to do that. But it's more likely now than it has ever been. I have never heard commentators come out and advocate for it publicly. I know there have been people in the past. I mean, heck, when I was a player, a million years ago, when I was a player, there was a gentleman named Dick DeVenzio who actually played basketball at Duke and was way ahead of his time in his view of the NCAA and the exploitation of players. And I was on an NCAA committee back then. I was on the NCAA Long Range Planning Committee when I was in college, and clearly we didn't do a very good job. Look where everything is. But when we were going to the Final Four in 1986, we were the number one overall seed. And I knew DeVenzio, and he happened to be on campus, and he had broached the subject with me. And I don't, honestly, it's been so long, I don't remember whether he was kind of joking and I had joked back with him. I said, "Hey, Dick, how about we do it next year?" I was a senior. I wanted to play, and I didn't think that way about doing something that would maybe be hurtful to me, but would be positive for players that would come after me. That wasn't my mindset. So you're asking players, and it wouldn't take, I just heard you guys, wouldn't take 60 guys. It would just take one team. Only one team would have to disrupt this whole thing. And that would be really interesting. I don't see it happening right now, but it is more likely now than I think it has ever been.
Talking to Jay Bilas, our college basketball analyst. Jay, let's go on the court and talk about actual basketball. And let's start before we look at an overall view of the game you had last night, where North Carolina comes back from 16 down. Joel Berry hits a tough three with 4 seconds to go. And then Jaquan Newton hits just an inside half court as a buzzer beater to give Miami a nice win at Chapel Hill. Puts them at 21-8 this year, 10-7 in the conference. So talk about the end of that game. And then kind of where – we know the Blue Bloods here, but where Miami kind of starting to fit into this equation.
Yeah, Miami's good. They would have been much better if they'd had Bruce Brown for the last 8 games and on into the remainder of the season. Brown broke his foot. They call it a lower leg injury. I don't know why they do that, but he broke his foot and had surgery on February 1. So he's been out. He's their best player, best defender, best rebounder, 6'5". He was preseason All-ACC. He's a really good player. So they'd be even better. But the end of that game was sort of typical of what you're seeing now from today's players. And, Mike, and Trey, not to make us old, but when we were younger, how many of those did you see where you had, like a step inside a half court shots made? It seems like, though, I don't want to say they're routine because they're not, but you have to defend those now. And so after Barry hit that amazing three, it kind of reminded me of the North Carolina Villanova game.
We were just saying that, yeah.
Ago. And so when he made that shot, you're like, holy cow, overtime. And I think it was 4.1 or 4.2 seconds, whatever it is. And instead of calling a timeout, they inbounded the ball. Now, remember, Newton was the guy guarding Joel Berry.
Right.
So instead of hanging his head, which momentarily he kind of stopped, and then he's like, I got to go. And he got the ball and kind of looped around. And all these guys, they practice now, kind of half-court shots. And some of them do it, some teams do it right before they finish a shoot-around. But it is not unusual for guys to be comfortable taking that shot. And without calling a timeout, Carolina couldn't set up any kind of set defense. But Joel Berry was right with them. It was just an amazing ending. And that was only his 5th three of the year. I think he was like 4 for 30 from three going into that shot. And winds up making that thing. He's not a great free throw shooter and hit 4 pressure free throws right before all that happened in order to preserve a chance to win. So that was it ain't easy to win on the road in Chapel Hill. And for Miami to do it last night, that sealed any discussion about them getting in, and they're going to be a decent seed as well.
Look, it was a fascinating game, Jay, as Jay Bilas is with us, and quite frankly, because of what we've been talking about, not only the intrigue off the court, but there really isn't a dominant team in college basketball this year. This could be one of the most interesting tournaments we're going to see going forward in a long, long time.
Yeah, I agree with you, Trey, but we do say that every year. I mean, that is said every year.
I don't know, Jay. It feels like the last couple of years we've known who the top 2 or 3 teams are going to be. Can we say that with any great certainty going into this year?
Yeah, we absolutely know who the top teams are. Michigan State hasn't lost in forever. They've only lost 3 games. I mean, if you look at the records of the top teams, they've only lost 3 times. And so, Villanova is really good, and they're getting healthier now. They've had Phil Booth out, who was a hero of the Final Four of the championship game that they beat North Carolina in 2 years ago. And we've got a lot of quality teams at the top. Now, I agree with you that we don't have a team that stands out quite like Kentucky did in 2015. But remember, Kentucky didn't win the championship that year. And so, we and I don't mean I led by saying you're exactly right, but we do say that every year. I can go back and get tape. We say it every year, just like we say.
I'm just trying to be consistent, man.
Yeah, you are consistent. Just like after the Super Bowl, we say, and now it's time to turn our attention to college basketball.
Oh, there it is.
You're going to throw that back in my face, aren't you?
Actually, that was brilliant. I just want you to know that really was brilliant. All right, so listen, who would you bet on then? If you had all your chips in, and again, bet in a figurative sense because you can't do that. If you had to say, yeah, I'm all in on this team being that team, who would it be?
Okay, bet in a figurative sense, because just like cheating in college sports, nobody gambles.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay, exactly. I would go, like I said before the season, I thought Michigan State was the best team and would be the best team. I think they have been. They took a couple of losses in the middle of the year where people are going, hey, wait a minute, I don't know about this team. I don't know when we started thinking that if a team loses, they can't win the title anymore. And it's kind of like people talk about, and maybe even that was implied in your question, that, hey, it's wide open. Okay, well, if it's wide open, how come the top teams can't win now? Like all of a sudden, we don't trust the top temes to win. But I think Michigan State, Villanova, I think Virginia is still being overlooked as a team that can win this whole thing. I mean, while I've been talking about like, hey, Duke is really coming on now, and before the loss last night, North Carolina's playing as well as anybody in the league. Like Virginia is like 16-1, and they're playing in the same league as everybody else. And it's not like they've had 15 games against Pittsburgh and everybody else has played the rest of the league. They're capable of winning this whole thing in a heartbeat, just like everybody else. And I think Purdue is still really, really dangerous and a good team that can win it. And you got several teams after that. If you want to go through Xavier and Duke is the best, the most talented team and all that stuff. But man, Michigan State, they don't have a whole lot of holes, and I realize the Big Ten is not what it has been this year, but they won that thing outright, and they've got real talent and size and depth, and that kid Jaren Jackson Jr. he's a top 5 pick and is starting to play like it.
Jay, only about a minute left. I want you to handicap 2 teams, one selfishly for me, but they're 2 teams that are sitting at 17-12 of getting in the tournament. That's Notre Dame and Oklahoma. Both 17-12 in a different way. Oklahoma starting out hot and then really falling off the map. And the injury at Notre Dame to Bonzie Colson, 15 games, Matt Farrell, 5 games, and now Bonzie's coming back. Both those teams and their chance of getting in.
I think for Notre Dame, it depends on how the Irish look with Colson back, because with him in the lineup, they're they were a top 5 team. They're clearly a top 10 team with him out. And they had Matt Farrell out. DJ Harvey's been out. They've been banged up and still have put together a representative record of a bubble team. So I think if Bonzi comes back at any semblance of what he was before, they've got an opportunity to get in here. I don't know if the committee will take injuries into account for selection. I often hear they take it into account for seeding and not selection. It's kind of the Parcells you are, what your record says you are. I'm not confident what they're going to do with Oklahoma, because on that selection reveal, the committee had Oklahoma number 16, and you're like, on what planet are they the 16th best team? I don't care how many quad wins they have. All you have to do is have 2 functioning eyeballs. And you can't do that. And that was the same committee that had Michigan State number 11. You're like, really? Are you kidding? And so they made a couple mistakes that were pretty egregious. But considering Oklahoma was 16, I would feel somewhat comfortable they're going to get in. But if they keep losing like this, they're gonna sort of dig their own grave in that regard.
Well, look, it's great to finally be at a time that we can talk about college basketball. So we appreciate you being on with us, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it, man.
Hey, guys, I didn't get my law degree to talk about college basketball. I got my law degree to talk about college basketball.
There you go.
Wait till next time we have
boom job.
Next time you're on, you're going to break down the quads. Have fun with that.
not only that, but he's going to fix everything in the NCAA the next time he's on. Jay Bilas.